Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, readings on the topic of mindfulness. And so much is said about mindfulness in these days, in general, in popular culture, and it's the hot topic. So I thought it'd be good to we thought it'd be good to read some of the suttas on mindfulness. And I'm just going to read what Ajahn Geoff notes is the longest treatment of Satipaṭṭhāna found in the canon. And that's Digha Nikaya 22, the Great Establishing of Mindfulness Discourse, Mahāsatipaṭṭhāna Sutta. And just note that, just some brief notes from Ajahn Geoff's introduction. He says, Satipaṭṭhāna, the establishing, which is upatthana, of mindfulness, sati, is a meditative technique for training the mind to keep mindfulness firmly established in a particular frame of reference in all its activities. The term sati is related to the verb sarati, to remember, or to keep in mind. Okay, and this sutta is quite long, so I'll have to skip over some parts, and there's a refrain that repeats many, many times, but I won't read it every time. I'll just sort of say and so forth, or mention that's the refrain. Okay. Digha Nikaya 22. I have heard that on one occasion the Blessed One was staying in the Kuru country. Now there is a town of the Kurus called Kamasadama. There the Blessed One addressed the monks. Monks, Lord, the monks responded to him. The Blessed One said, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and distress, for the attainment of the right method, and for the realization of unbinding. In other words, the four establishings of mindfulness. Which four? There is the case where a monk remains focused on the body in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. He remains focused on feelings, mind, mental qualities. He remains focused on feelings in and of themselves, ardent and alert and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. He remains focused on mind in and of itself, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. He remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. And by the way, this is page 185 of Handful of Leaves, Volume 1, Ajahn Geoff's translation. First section, A, body. And how does a monk remain focused on the body in and of itself? 1. There is a case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, sits down folding his legs crosswise, holding his body erect, and setting mindfulness to the fore. Always mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he discerns, I am breathing in long. Or breathing out long, he discerns, I am breathing out long. Or breathing in short, he discerns, I am breathing in short. or breathing out short, he discerns, I am breathing out short. He trains himself, I will breathe in sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself, I will breathe out sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself, I will breathe in calming bodily fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out calming bodily fabrication. Just as a dexterous turner or his apprentice, when making a long turn, discerns, I am making a long turn, or in making a short turn, discerns, I am making a short turn. In the same way, the monk, when breathing in long, discerns, I am breathing in long, or breathing out long, he discerns, I am breathing out long. He trains himself, I will breathe in calming bodily fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out calming bodily fabrication. And then this is the refrain which repeats again and again and again. In this way, he remains focused internally on the body in and of itself, or externally on the body in and of itself, or both internally and externally on the body in and of itself. Or he remains focused on the phenomena of origination with regard to the body, on the phenomena of passing away with regard to the body, or on the phenomena of origination and passing away with regard to the body. Or his mindfulness that there is a body is maintained to the extent of knowledge and remembrance, and he remains independent, unsustained by not clinging to anything in the world. This is how a monk remains focused on the body in and of itself. 2. And further, when walking, the monk discerns, I am walking. When standing, he discerns, I am standing. When sitting, he discerns, I am sitting. When lying down, he discerns, I am lying down. Or however his body is disposed, that is how he discerns it. And then the refrain, in this way he remains focused internally on the body in and of itself, and so forth. 3. And further, when going forward and returning, he makes himself fully alert. When looking toward and looking away, he makes himself fully alert. When flexing and extending his limbs, he makes himself fully alert. When carrying his outer cloak, his upper robe, and his bowl, he makes himself fully alert. When eating, drinking, chewing, and savoring, he makes himself fully alert. When urinating and defecating, he makes himself fully alert. When walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and remaining silent, he makes himself fully alert. In this way, he remains focused internally on the body in and of itself, and so forth. 4. And further, just as if a sack with openings at both ends were full of various kinds of grain, wheat, rice, mung beans, kidney beans, sesame seeds, husked rice, and a man with good eyesight pouring it out were to reflect, this is wheat, this is rice, these are mung beans, these are kidney beans, these are sesame seeds, this is husked rice. In the same way, the monk reflects on this very body, from the soles of the feet on up, from the crown of the head on down, surrounded by skin, and full of various kinds of unclean things. In this body there are head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, tendons, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, pleura, spleen, lungs, large intestines, small intestines, gorge, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, skin oil, saliva, mucus, fluid in the joints, urine. In this way, he remains focused internally on the body in and of itself, and so forth. 5. And further, just as a dexterous butcher or his apprentice, having killed a cow, would sit at a crossroads, cutting it up into pieces, The monk reflects on this very body, however it stands, however it is disposed in terms of properties. In this body there is the earth property, the liquid property, the fire property, and the wind property. In this way he remains focused internally on the body in and of itself, and so forth. 6. And further, as if he were to see a corpse cast away in a charnel ground, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, dead, bloated, livid, and festering, he applies it to this very body. This body too, such is its nature, such is its future, such its unavoidable fate. In this way he remains focused internally on the body in and of itself, and so forth. Or again, as if he were to see a corpse cast away in a charnel ground, being chewed by crows, being chewed by vultures, being chewed by hawks, being chewed by dogs, being chewed by hyenas, being chewed by various other creatures. A skeleton smeared with flesh and blood connected with tendons. A fleshless skeleton smeared with blood connected with tendons. A skeleton without flesh or blood connected with tendons. Bones detached from their tendons, scattered in all directions. Here a hand bone, there a foot bone, here a shin bone, there a thigh bone, here a hip bone, there a backbone, here a rib, there a chest bone, here a shoulder bone, there a neck bone, here a jaw bone, there a tooth, here a skull. The bones whiten somewhat like the color of shells. The bones piled up more than a year old. The bones decomposed into a powder. He applies it to this very body. This body too, such is its nature, such is its future, such its unavoidable fate. In this way he remains focused internally on the body in and of itself, and so forth. So the second Satipaṭṭhāna feeling, B, feelings. And how does a monk remain focused on feelings in and of themselves? There is a case where a monk, when feeling a painful feeling, discerns, I am feeling a painful feeling. When feeling a pleasant feeling, he discerns, I am feeling a pleasant feeling. When feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he discerns, I am feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling. When feeling a painful feeling of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a painful feeling of the flesh. When feeling a painful feeling not of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a painful feeling not of the flesh. When feeling a pleasant feeling of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a pleasant feeling of the flesh. When feeling a pleasant feeling not of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a pleasant feeling not of the flesh. When feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling of the flesh. When feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling not of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling not of the flesh. In this way he remains focused internally on feelings in and of themselves, or externally on feelings in and of themselves, or both internally and externally on feelings in and of themselves, or he remains focused on the phenomena or origination with regard to feelings, on the phenomena of passing away with regard to feelings, or on the phenomena of origination and passing away with regard to feelings, or his mindfulness that there are feelings is maintained to the extent of knowledge and remembrance, and he remains independent, unsustained by not clinging to anything in the world. This is how a monk remains focused on feelings in and of themselves. C, mind. And how does a monk remain focused on the mind in and of itself? There is the case where a monk, when the mind has passion, discerns, the mind has passion. When the mind is without passion, he discerns, the mind is without passion. When the mind has aversion, he discerns, the mind has aversion. When the mind is without aversion, he discerns, the mind is without aversion. When the mind has delusion, he discerns, the mind has delusion. When the mind is without delusion, he discerns, the mind is without delusion. When the mind is constricted, he discerns, the mind is constricted. When the mind is scattered, he discerns, the mind is scattered. When the mind is enlarged, he discerns, the mind is enlarged. When the mind is not enlarged, he discerns that the mind is not enlarged. When the mind is surpassed, he discerns, the mind is surpassed. When the mind is unsurpassed, he discerns, the mind is unsurpassed. When the mind is concentrated, he discerns, the mind is concentrated. When the mind is not concentrated, he discerns, the mind is not concentrated. When the mind is released, he discerns, the mind is released. When the mind is not released, he discerns, the mind is not released. In this way, he remains focused internally on the mind in and of itself, and so forth. D. Mental qualities. And how does a monk remain focused on mental qualities in and of themselves? 1. There is the case where a monk remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves, with reference to the 5 hindrances. And how does a monk remain focused on mental qualities in and of themselves, with reference to the 5 hindrances? There is the case where, there being sensual desire present within, a monk discerns, there is sensual desire present within me. Or there being no sensual desire present within, he discerns, there is no sensual desire present within me. He discerns how there is the arising of unarisen sensual desire, and he discerns how there is the abandoning of sensual desire once it has arisen, and he discerns how there is no further appearance in the future of sensual desire that has been abandoned. And note, this same formula is repeated for the remaining hindrances: ill will, sloth and drowsiness, restlessness and anxiety, and uncertainty. In this way, he remains focused internally on mental qualities in and of themselves, and so forth. 2. And further, the monk remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves, with reference to the 5 clinging aggregates. And how does a monk remain focused on mental qualities in and of themselves, with reference to the 5 clinging aggregates? There is a case where a monk discerns, such is form, such its origination, such its disappearance. And the same for feeling, perception, fabrications, consciousness. Such is consciousness, such its origination, such its disappearance. In this way, he remains focused internally on mental qualities in and of themselves. 3. And furthermore, the monk remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves with reference to the 6-fold internal and external sense media. And how does a monk remain focused on mental qualities in and of themselves with reference to the 6-fold internal and external sense media? There is the case where he discerns the eye, he discerns forms, he discerns the fetter that arises dependent on both. He discerns how there is the arising of an unarisen fetter, and he discerns how there is the abandoning of a fetter once it has arisen. And he discerns how there is no further appearance in the future of a fetter that has been abandoned. Note, the same formula is repeated for the remaining sense media: ear, nose, tongue, body, and intellect. And so there's not time to go through everything, but I will note that under this section, mental qualities, number 4 is remaining focused on mental qualities in and of themselves with reference to the 7 factors of awakening. 5 is with reference to the 4 noble truths, and there's a detailed explanation of the 4 noble truths, including the 4th noble truth, Eightfold Path, explained in detail. And then this section on mental qualities ends with, in this way, he remains focused internally on mental qualities in and of themselves, or externally on mental qualities in and of themselves, or both internally and externally on mental qualities in and of themselves, or he remains focused on the phenomena of origination with regard to mental qualities, on the phenomena of passing away with regard to mental qualities, or on the phenomena of origination and passing away with regard to mental qualities, or his mindfulness that there are mental qualities is maintained to the extent of knowledge and remembrance, and he remains independent, unsustained by not clinging to anything in the world. This is how a monk remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves, with reference to the Four Noble Truths. Now the conclusion. Now if anyone would develop these four establishings of mindfulness in this way for 7 years, one of two fruits can be expected for him, either gnosis right here and now, or if there be any remnant of clinging sustenance, non-return. Let alone 7 years, if anyone would develop these four establishings of mindfulness in this way for 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 7 months, 6 months, 5, 4, 3, 2 months, 1 month, half a month, one of two fruits can be expected for him, either gnosis right here and now, or if there be any remnant of clinging sustenance, non-return, let alone half a month. If anyone would develop these four establishings of mindfulness in this way for 7 days, one of two fruits can be expected for him, either gnosis right here and now, or if there be any remnant of clean sustenance, non-return. This is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and distress, for the attainment of the right method, and for the realization of unbinding. In other words, the four establishings of mindfulness. Thus was it said, and in reference to this was it said. This is what the Blessed One said. Gratified, the monks delighted in the Blessed One's words. So that's the reading for today.
I have a question about mind. I can't remember all the details, but unsurpassed, surpassed, and there's a list of a few there that are pretty general, and I'm not sure, what they mean exactly. So a little bit of explanation, like there's several before the concentrated and unconcentrated. I think it's enlarged or unsurpassed, surpassed, a couple there, like expanded. If you could talk about that a little bit, that'd be helpful. Whoever.
I don't know if there's some ready footnotes from Ajahn Geoff, but I mean, I can give it a shot if not. Music.
What the commentaries say.
Yeah. I mean, well, the first few are pretty self-evident. I think that's the greed, hatred, delusion, kind of routine. Then there's contracted and distracted as a pair, which I think Venerable Analayo notes is actually the one where they're not actually opposites in terms of like, you'd think contracted, expanded, but this is contracted, distracted. So the mind is either very closed in and narrow, constricted, or in this particular pair, it's kind of distracted, it's out there, it's unfocused, not a narrow focus and not even really a broad focus, just kind of unfocused is how I pick it up anyway. And then, what's the opposite of expanded on that one? They're the next pairs, I think.
This is first like when the mind is constricted, then when the mind is scattered, when the mind is enlarged, when the mind is not enlarged.
Okay, so it's just enlarged and not enlarged, or expanded and not expanded.
But it can be concentrated and enlarged, or concentrated and unenlarged. I mean, you can, or
Depends on who you ask. I interpret anyway, and I think I've seen it explained in somebody's commentaries, that the expanded or the enlarged mind represents, states like the fullness of, say, the Brahma-viharas, and they're like when we chant, unbounded, expanded, those kinds of things, that kind of very enlarged consciousness, enlarged awareness that is all-encompassing. And the opposite is when it's not like that. I think, and concentration just has various levels of expansion or not expansion, just depending on how it's developed, how well it's developed. Ajahn Geoff, as we were talking about a little bit ago, kind of tends to interpret, and it makes sense to me too, that true samadhi is a very broad focus in all situations. But it's also to the extent that any individual has developed it, so there may be some degrees of samadhi that aren't quite so, expanded, but are still on the path of right samadhi, as opposed to a very narrow, constricted kind of a thing. So, and surpassed and unsurpassed is the next one.
That doesn't have a footnote. This march does have a footnote.
Okay.
A good footnote. It's
Okay, go for it. See if I'm.
So this is Ajahn Geoff's footnote. Mahāgatan is enlarged, and this term is used together with the immeasurable/unlimited in the standard description of the awareness generated in the practice of the Brahma-viharas, Samyutta Nikaya 42.8. According to Venerable Anuruddha in Majjhima Nikaya 127, however, an enlarged mind is not immeasurable. Its range of awareness is larger than the body, but still measurable, ranging in distance from the shade of a tree to the earth bounded by the ocean.
Okay. Wonder where you got that from. I'm not going to argue with Anuruddha. So anywhere from the full size of the earth up to the immeasurables, depending on who you go with. Nothing about surpassed and unsurpassed.
No.
I can't remember. I remember reading something about it. Maybe somebody else remembers, whether it's regarding, unsurpassed is the mind that is unsurpassed. There's, no other state that it's experiencing that is any further to be developed. And surpassed would mean that there is. But I can't remember whether it's in regards to just, like meditative states or, states of concentration and, all the way up through the formless attainments, or whether it's also in regard to noble attainments. Does anybody remember what the scope of surpassed and unsurpassed?
The commentaries define them as the immaterials.
Say again?
The commentaries define them as the immaterials.
Just as far as so just states of samadhi, essentially, not the noble attainments.
Yeah, although the same commentarial thing I'm going on also said that the expanded, or I think they translated it as exalted and unexalted, were the jhanas, like the form jhanas, and then the immaterials were the next two. But I think this explanation makes a lot more sense, so I have no idea. So I have no idea the validity of, what I read.
Ajahn Geoff, in another writing, notes that surpassed and unsurpassed can both refer to, or either refer to one's own experience, i.e., this is as far as I've made it in settling my mind, and also to the experience of others. This is as far as I made it, but I know there's more beyond this.
My own interpretation of this is, it's not really about getting the definitions of each of those qualities that are listed, but it's like having an honest assessment of what's in your mind. So like, you could insert any word, he knows his mind is neurotic, and he knows when his mind is not neurotic. You could insert probably anything, but yeah, I think what it's pointing at is like, say you have a thought of anger, and then you have the next, I'm not angry or something. That would be not mindfulness of mind. Like, it's my.
I would love to hear some testimony from the Ajahns in terms of what types of establishing of mindfulness you use throughout the day. For instance, when you wake up, do you try to observe body sensations? During the day, in the standing and walking positions, when you realize you've lost mindfulness, is there one you go to immediately? Or do you find that with the training, naturally, your mind's just constantly saying, this is a mind of aversion, this is a mind of whatever?
For myself, I try and always reference back to the body. It's easiest, most direct, particularly in activity during the day. Usually in either the bodily position or the actual disposition, like the clear comprehension of walking, you're walking, sitting, you're sitting, eating, you're eating, drinking, you're drinking. That's kind of, for me, the default. Of course, if there's strong moods or strong mental states coming up, they tend to attract the attention. And then I try mindfully go to that, but usually with a body reference for myself. There's 3 other Ajahns.
For me, usually the breath. Buddha. Like if I'm working or something and I feel myself getting spun out, I'll stop and I'll just take a deep breath and calm the body, calm the stomach, the face, just that constantly calming, consciously calming the body.
I found that pretty useful when called pausing. Pause.
Pausing.
Yeah. Open the key to the car, pause. So in that sense, it's very useful.
Luang Por Sumedho has walking through doors practice, like rather than bursting through doors, you open a door and then pause and then walk through the door. Like the monk's room or the office or something. But if we're just operating on automatic, it's just sort of bursting through the doors and stumbling around.